So, fancy title, isn't it? What's this talk about? I'll be talking about lots of JavaScript. I'll show you lots of code. And since we're fine on time because we are, I don't know if you heard, running 10 minutes behind schedule. So we'll finish at 11:45. And you will still have plenty of time to go to the next talks after lunch, or until lunch. So this talk is about JavaScript and how you can actually enhance your applications with JavaScript, your existing applications, and create rich, fancy featured applications that you use in the web nowadays. If you go a bit back in time, about 15 years ago, the web and web pages looked like this. And I think it's a good thing that I spared you the background music and the animations on this. More seriously, you had pages like Yahoo that were a bit static, collections of links and everything. There were some forms, so there was some kind of interaction. eBay was already around, so also something like interactive social-like features. If you remember back then, the PHP version was version 3. It was year 2000 compliant, yay. Who used PHP back then? Oh, I didn't. So in 90-something, I wasn't probably old enough to use PHP. Fast forward to today, the web looks and web pages or web applications look totally different. You have stuff like Google Docs, so real desktop-like feeling you have for these applications. You have even offline capabilities in that, so it even works when you don't have any connection. You have stuff like Street View and Maps. You have whole IDEs in the internet as web applications that you can just run into your browser. So from 1998 to now, the web totally has changed, and websites turned to web applications became much more desktop-like and much more pleasant to use. So what we'll do today, I'll talk about a lot of techniques that actually enable creating these applications, and these are one of them. I will talk about web application development in general, what this means in JavaScript. For JavaScript applications, I'll be talking about communication with WebSockets, about including external content in the applications, about APIs, about authentication about these APIs, how to do real-time communication, and also talk a bit about WebRTC. And if you don't know what that is, you will at the end of this talk. Before that, a few words about me. As you told, I work at ResearchGate. The aim, it's a social network for scientists, and the aim is to actually give science back to the researchers and help researchers build up their reputation and actually do their research, and by that accelerate the scientific progress. We have about 2.5 million, 2.6 million users at the moment. That's what the page looks like, so very scientific and research related. We are also, if you look closely, hiring. If you want to know more about that, ask me after the talk. Especially if you want to work at a company where you have table tennis and soccer and football and everything, air hockey, just talk to me. When I'm not working at ResearchGate, I'm frequently giving talks on conferences, and I work and live in Berlin. The slides will be available on SpeakerDick after the talk. And let's start. So, because I want to show you lots of code and lots of demos in this talk, I decided to build up my demonstration application that I'm going to build in front of you with Meteor JS. Meteor JS is a very new framework that actually is quite pleasant to use. Who's heard of it, of Meteor? Like 4, 5, 6, okay. For those of you who haven't heard of it, it actually is a JavaScript framework that lets you write JavaScript server-side and client-side, and you don't have to care about the communication between server and client, so client being the browser, because it just abstracts that. So it's still very early in development. I wouldn't advise to use it for production purposes, but for this demonstration it's quite nice because you won't see any boilerplate code at all. And I really recommend checking this out. Let's start with a demonstration. So you see that you see nothing. That will change. So as I said, I'm going to write a Meteor application, and my first iteration of this application is just the basic hello world, because always you start with hello world. What does the code look like in Meteor? Here it is. So I have just a few files. You see this over here. Most important one is I have a template. I'll just make this a tad bigger. Is this good to see in the back? Size okay? Thumbs up? Great. So this is my template for my application. It just has a head with a title, a small body, with some nodes, DOM nodes here. I have my hello world and an h1 tag. I also added some login buttons that are aligned right, and that's it. I also have a tiny bit of JavaScript in here, which is just said, okay, I want the sign up that Meteor gives me to be username only. It's just a bit of configuration. And that's all I wrote for this application. I added some libraries that I use later on. There are some keys I use for APIs, and the rest is Meteor related. This gives me an application that not only prints out hello world, but also have a complete login and sign up, which is really nice. So I can create an account here, choose a password. There are also ways to do email verification, and that's it. I have an account, I'm logged in. I also could sign out, change my password and everything. So all these boilerplate code, all the sign up thing is taken, is done by Meteor automatically. Also, this account is stored now in the back end in MongoDB, because MongoDB is at the moment the underlying data storage for Meteor. I don't have to do any AJAX calls. I don't have to do any setup for the databases. Meteor takes care of that. This makes it very easy to bootstrap such an application. Of course, if you want to scale, you may think, okay, it's not a good thing to have all this hidden from you. More on that later. So if we go one step further in our demonstration, I now added a small stream feature to my application. So what I can do is I can write a text entry, hello PHP UK, send it, and it appears in my stream here. I had to change very little for this to work. So the way Meteor structures your application is you have a client folder. Everything that's on there was just executed at the client in the browser. You have a server folder. Everything that's on there is just executed on the server, which is in the end Node.js. And you have what's in other folders is shared between both client and server and executed on both. So what I had to do to add the stream feature is I added a model that is executed on both client and server, where I define my shoutbox entry collection, which defines in the end a MongoDB collection and creates this. If I'm on the server here, I will also publish this collection I added and say, okay, I want to publish everything. All entries should be visible. I could write MongoDB queries here to actually limit what I want to show, limit the fields or limit something else. I also said, okay, I want to publish the user data. The user data automatically is published. And I also only want to show the username and the user ID to the client side of the application. And then I say, okay, I also want to allow insertion of shoutbox entries, but only if there is some user logged in and if the user of the document that gets created is like the current user ID. So I have some restrictions set in place here. Then I added some templates. Here I'm referencing a template called stream in my layout. My stream iterates over all the entries in the stream and then calls the entry template. And if there is a current user, I show the input template. And my entry template just displays the username, text, and date. And the input template is basically a form, or the form that you saw to add a new entry. The last thing, I have to write a bit of code in my Vue.js to actually tell what is supposed to be displayed in the templates. So I'm subscribing here to the shortboxed entries and user data collections that I published on the server side. And then I say, okay, in my stream template, the entries should come from the shortbox entry collection. So I say shortbox entries find, that's my query. I want to auth all entries. And for each entry that I get back, I query the user of this entry. And then I have a small array here. I push an object into this array, which with the username, a text, and the date. I'm also with some small library linkifying this text, it's just so that links in this are clickable. It's an open library you can just download. I place this in here. And then I just return this array, and the template will have this array. Also, each time something changes in there, the template will be updated automatically. You'll see this in a moment. And for form submitting at my input template, I bind myself on the submit event of the form, and I'm checking if there is a logged in user, and if there is, I'm just inserting a new document into my shortbox entries collection with the current user ID, the text the user entered, and the new date. And then, of course, I'm resetting the form to 0. All the communication that goes on there, all the AJAX calls, are all the inserts and the stuff in the backend is all done automatically. I don't have to care about this. So this makes it really, really small and really easy and fast to write. I said that all the stuff updates automatically. So now I have a second browser, which is quite hard to resize. So here I'm creating a second account called Bob. I have to create an account. Okay. So if Bob writes something, hello world, and sends it, without any reload, it gets shown here automatically. I don't have to care about all the communication happening there. I'll tell you in a moment how this works. So let's get back to the slides. Fancy. So a lot of stuff Meteor handles for you, but what's in it for you? Because you have your legacy applications, the big projects, and you can probably not base something up on Meteor. There was actually a lot of stuff that you can use in your projects, in your daily work. First of all, that's my relationship with CSS. I can't do it, and if anybody is a CSS master, for me it's just, okay, if it doesn't work in Internet Explorer, add zoom 1 and I can do this. So it's always worth it to look at how other people are doing CSS, especially if you want to refactor and clean your CSS up. And I use Bootstrap for this small demo, and it's I trust the people doing CSS in our company. They say, okay, we oftentimes look at Bootstrap, see how they are doing it, and maybe apply some of their patterns to us. So it's really worth checking out these CSS frameworks, because there are very smart people there. Then, templates. I used templates in my application. Who of you is using templates in your JavaScript application? Like half, maybe. Oh, yeah, we do also at ResearchGate. Just saying. Oftentimes in JavaScript application, you see stuff like this. You have a string with some HTML in it. You're iterating over some data. You're concatenating the string and then put this string somewhere in a DOM node. This is, who has seen code like this? Great. So, who has written code like this? Okay. This is so wrong on so many levels. Does anybody see the error in this code? Yes?
A hash you get over ID.
Oh no, that's perfectly valid. I could have an ID with a hash.
Is it the HTML UL?
Right, correct. It's not closing. And it's really, really hard to miss because I don't have any syntax highlighting in here because it's just a string. I don't have any structure, any indentation. So it's very easy to miss. Also, I just noticed yesterday that it's actually a cross-site scripting vulnerability because I'm not escaping the display name. Okay, maybe it's escaped in the backend, so could be. But it's very easy to, with this, to also have like XSS holes in your application. Then we are forgetting everything we learned with server-side programming because there we have stuff like MVC. And we're using templates all the time to separate our concerns. And here we're just putting everything together. So don't do this. Keynote. Great. Use templates. And there are a lot of templating languages available, and they're very easy to use. There's Mustache JS, Hogan JS, which is basically Mustache but only faster, because templates are pre-compiled. Handlebars, which is also a Mustache dialect. There's jQuery templates and a whole lot of other things. Just look for JavaScript templating, and you find tons of stuff that you can use, and actually these templating languages handle all the sanitation stuff. You have nice HTML templates that also your designers can use. You also find the templates in your HTML afterwards if your application gets bigger, and don't have to search through tons of JavaScript code in order to find where to add a class to a DOM node. Next, what you saw was two-way communication, so this instant updating thing. With Meteor, it's done with WebSockets, depending on the browser, and it falls back to long polling and short polling, all that stuff. And there are already, so it's very easy to use if you're using libraries like Socket.io or Sock.js or stuff like JWebSocket if you're a Java guy. And all these solutions also fall back to techniques that work in IE6 even. And like the worst solution would be just to use some inline Flash, and even that is supported by these frameworks and these libraries. So this is something to think about to actually make your application more responsive in some ways. Best thing, indication counters on your application, on your website, if a new message comes. If the user just sees it when the message comes, and not if he reloads, you actually create more engagement. So that actually is something you can think about. If you want to know more about WebSockets, read the specification, or just read this blog article because this explains it very, very well. Now that we all did the groundwork of our application, like basic stuff, storing some data, let's have some fun with it and mash it up with external data. Oftentimes, you see with these streams and user-generated content that people put links into them, like this YouTube video. Wouldn't it be nice to actually not only have this link there, but a preview, like probably Facebook does? Fortunately, YouTube allows us to include their videos on external sites. They have this embed feature. You can go onto their site. If you have a video, you click on embed this on another page, you get back a bit of HTML, which is basically an iframe, and you can put it into a site. If you analyze this, you see, oh, this iframe is basically every time the same. The only thing that changes is the video ID. So what I could do is I could, for each entry that I have, look if there are links in there. If the link is a YouTube link, I could pass out the video ID because it's always like the V parameter, hopefully, and then put it into the YouTube iframe tag and put it into my site. But what if YouTube changes their URL structure? And I think they also have video URLs that don't have a V parameter. What if the embed tag changes? Okay, I have to change my code. That's not too bad, and hopefully happens not a lot of times. What if I not only want to support YouTube, but also all the other services around there, and maybe not only videos, but also all the image services? Then I have like maybe my product manager comes up with 20, 40 services he wants to support, and I have to look through all their documentation, all their code, all their embed tags they have. And I have to change it frequently because with 40 services, it's very, very likely that each month one of them changes something. So it's a hell to maintain. Fortunately, there is a solution for that. One of the solutions, or there are many of them, one of the solutions is called OEmbed. It works like this. You have a URL to a YouTube video. If you query this URL, you get back the HTML page. And in the header, there are some links pointing to an OEmbed endpoint. This is the same endpoint, a bit bigger. So it's youtube.com/oembed, and then the URL of the YouTube video, and then the format is JSON and some other parameters. If you call this URL, you get back a JSON object with some meta information about the video, like the title, which is somewhere in here, the author, thumbnail, image, and most importantly, a block of HTML, which is essentially the YouTube embed tag, which renders the iframe to render the YouTube video in. Or in this case, it's not an iframe, but it's an object tag. And the result may then look like this. If you don't want to make all these process of actually discovering the OEmbed endpoint, because it's like queries you have to do and all this stuff, HTML you have to parse, you also can use a service, for example, someone like Embeddly who managed to do all that for you. So you just make a request to Embeddly, say I want to have the OEmbed meta information about this YouTube video, and Embeddly gives it back to you. And it's very, very fairly priced. Other ways to discover meta information is through Open Graph, which is basically some additional meta text in the HTML of the page, like a title and an image. Twitter uses a different technique because they just have different names of the meta tag, because like taking the same names that are already there in Open Graph is not worth it. There's also microdata and microformats, which just work that you annotate some DOM nodes where the content, important content like the title or the description or thumbnail image is in. You annotate this with special classes. Pick whatever you want to get meta information. And also you can just fall back to the common meta text like a title description if you want to have meta information about a URL. Let's demo this. So, first of all, I'm gonna post a YouTube video. It had been playing. Okay. I have to copy over my keys. And now, okay, it worked. So what happened now is that I sent this URL to OEmbed, got back the preview, and inserted the thumbnail URL, and if I click on it, I can actually play the video and be happy about it. Code-wise, I added the Embeddly library. They offer a jQuery-based JavaScript library, which makes it very easy to use. I'm here registering for my entry template on the rendered event. And for all links that have the class OEmbed, because I give every link the class OEmbed when linkifying my templates or my entries, I call the Embeddly function with my API key. And then if I get back the display callback with the meta information in this OEmbed object, I'll just put this after my entry. For this, I created also a template called embed preview, which is basically the thumbnail URL and a small link with the provider name and the title. If you want to get in more details about this, check out the code afterwards. Important, when you're including external content, is security. Is this actually safe? Because we get back some HTML from an external source. Now it's not safe because there could be script tags in it, and then you have cross-site scripting. Or even if you don't have any script tags, there could be link tags which just execute JavaScript on click and all that stuff. So what you should do is, to prevent something like this, you should sanitize the input that comes in. Of course, Embeddly also has some sanitation in it, so they also take care that there is no script tags and no invalid stuff coming in, but you should really trust nobody and not even yourself, probably. So sanitize external input, and one library to do this is called Caja. It's built by Google, so they know their stuff and they're using it themselves. And it sanitizes HTML and strips out all things that you don't want to have in there, like script tags, invalid URLs, and all that. So if I want to demo that, first of all, I'm going to add some cross-site scripting to my page. So if I click in here and actually embed the HTML, I get a nice JavaScript alert. Because what I did is I just replaced the actual HTML with some fake HTML with a script tag in it. If I want to sanitize this now, the only thing I added is the call to the Caja library to sanitize this HTML. One thing you see is behind the script tag there's also a bold foo. And if I reload my page, oh, I already reloaded, nice, and click on it again, you see the only thing happens is no JavaScript execution and only this foo is in there, so the whole script tag is stripped out. So let's go back to removing this and back to the slides. So if you have external content, always sanitize it. Don't trust someone externally to do it for you. Next, API access. We may want to get data from somewhere else. And we maybe want to do this in our client application and not hit our servers for that, because why just routing this over our servers? It's like load that we don't actually need. For this demonstration, I'm using as an API provider StatusNet. It's a micro-growing platform. I'm just using StatusNet because maybe on conferences internet connection is not there, and this can be installed locally because it's open source. But it would work the same for Twitter, Facebook, or anybody else. One problem we have when doing API requests from our client application from JavaScript is the same origin policy. Because of the same origin policy which says that I only can access stuff that is on the same domain as my application or on the same host name, which is really important. I can't just make AJAX calls to twitter.com or status.net, because the browser will then say, no, you're not allowed to do this. This is really important for the web, because otherwise I could just make an AJAX request to Facebook. If the user is logged in, I get back his session cookie. Not a good thing. So it's really, really good that there is the same origin policy. For APIs, though, I trust the API provider not to leak any session information the user has, maybe because he's logged in another tab. So that because it's mostly separate and authorization is done through something else than session or cookies. So for API calls, it's totally valid. There are several ways around that. One is JSONP. I don't want to explain it, it's a bit hacky. Much nicer is cross-origin resource sharing, which works like this. It's also supported in all browsers now. Not in IE6, I think it's IE8 upwards, but IE6 is dying, hopefully, and IE7 also, hopefully. And so you actually can use this in production. It works like this. If my client application on this domain makes a request, an AJAX request, to a foreign domain, first, the browser makes an options request, and this options request should return such a header, access control allow origin, whose value matches the domain of the one doing the request. Of course, the asterisk matches all, but I could restrict this. I also can put in more other restrictions, like what headers are allowed, and so I could like say, okay, you're not allowed to send any cookie headers, for example, what options in methods are allowed on this resource, but this is sufficient. And if the value matches, the AJAX request is actually performed. If not, the AJAX request is not done and you don't get back any data. So we can access our API. What about authorization? Because usually APIs use OAuth for authorization of APIs. Who has used OAuth before in some project? So it's a bit painful to use, but works quite well. One problem with OAuth is that you actually have shared secrets. or it relies on shared secrets. This is not really good in a JavaScript application where all the code is public. So the secret is not secret anymore, and anybody could do AJAX requests on your behalf. With OAuth 2, that changes, and because that introduced a way to actually do this securely. It works. So here is the specification. If you want to read it up, it works like this in JavaScript context. When I have an application, like here this leonard.com application, and I click on the sign in with Twitter button, it opens a browser pop-up pointing to the authorization endpoint of the API at twitter.com. There's also a parameter on it called client ID, which is my client ID here, the client ID of Leonard. So I need to be pre-registered at the API provider. In this browser pop-up, I can log in, if I'm not logged in already, and then say, yes, I really want Leonard to access my data. If I do this, the browser, still in the pop-up here, redirects me to a pre-registered callback URL, and the access token that I need later for the API request is part of the fragment of the URL. Because it's part of the fragment, that means it's not sent to the backend server, because the fragment always stays in the browser and it's not sent over the internet. So also the access token will not be visible to any proxies in between and so on. So the only thing this callback endpoint can do is render out some static HTML in JavaScript, and this JavaScript then can parse out the access token from the fragment of the URL, because in JavaScript you can access this, and if the callback endpoint is on the same domain as our client application in the underlying parent window, this JavaScript here can call a function on the parent window to transport the access token from here to here and then close this pop-up window. So in my application, I can have then the access token and can make AJAX requests to the API if it supports cross-origin resource sharing. Of course, I have to store the access token also somehow, because otherwise if I hit refresh on my browser, it would be gone again, and I would need to do this whole OAuth stance again. For storing the access token, you could use a cookie, but that gets transported over the internet again, so much nicer, if available, is local storage. And I'm also using that in my application. Also, if I have now an API connection, I may want to get new entries of, for example, Twitter, pushed to my application automatically. That would be actually really nice. Instead of me querying all the time, hey, does the user have new tweets? It would be nice if Twitter would just send me the tweets if they are coming in and sent. So I can save a whole lot of API calls and load. There are several ways to do this, and each API provider has their own custom homebrew solution. For StatusNet, it's called PubsubHubbub. PubsubHubbub. I really tried very often at home to pronounce this without stuttering. It works like this. When I have the API credentials of the user and I'm connected through OAuth to it, I also have the username and the user ID, and actually like the stream URL of the stream that the user has, of the user's home feed. If this home feed, the API provider supports PubsubHubbub, I can register for this feed of the user at some central hub that provides this feed. There's a bit of subscription mechanism going on there, and then each time the user on the right posts a new tweet on Twitter or on StatusNet, StatusNet sends this post to the hub, and the hub then pings every subscriber, like we subscribe for it, and sends them the tweet. And now I can do whatever I want with it. Of course, this doesn't work. This only works backend to backend, so server to server, because like a server somewhere in the internet can't send a new request to a browser. So we have to, in our Meteor application, we actually have to send it to the backend. Let's demo this. First of all, let's connect through. Oh, I'm already connected, sorry. Let's connect to StatusNet. So I click this connect button down here. A browser pop-up opens. I say, okay, I have to log in here, that's fine. and I say allow. So I'm connected now. Here, the username down here comes from StatusNet. Trust me just on that, or look it up into the code. And if I go a bit further, I'm adding now PubsubHubbub functionality. So let's display this here. In my application, I saw now also subscribe to the hub. I built this as an extra button just so that you can subscribe and unsubscribe. And if I add a new entry now here on StatusNet, once I logged in, hello through PubsubHubbub, and send it. You see it right here without any refreshing. So what I'm doing in my Meteor application, I'm getting in the backend the call from the hub with a new entry. I'm inserting it into my collection, and it automatically, through the WebSockets connection, gets transported to my client application. Since we are a bit short in time, just look it up in the code afterwards. It's like 20 lines of JavaScript or so. And to finish all that up, I also added some other nice features that you also, just for fun, for playing around with it. One of them is called Sarah. Because Apple has Siri, I have Sarah. So what I can do is, I can say, add a message, add Sarah. What is the biggest building in London? And wait a bit, there it is. Sarah answered me, the biggest building in London is by, hey, the Shard. Is this correct? Anybody from London here? Nobody from, I think it's correct because it's very new and it was in the news. So how does this work? This magic thing? Actually, it's very easy because I'm just using a public API called, from Wolfram Alpha, where I post my question to and get this answer back. So if we look at some of this code, it's happening in the backend at the Sarah JS. It's basically another MongoDB, another Meteor feature. I have a small query here. I say, okay, find me all entries that start with @Sarah space, and then I observe this query. In Meteor, that means it's run all the time. And each time a new entry was added, I basically just call the Wolfram Alpha API, and then if I got an answer, I'm inserting this answer as a new entry in my Shoutbox entries collections from earlier on. And the last feature, which I added like 8 days ago or so, or 9 days ago, is a chat feature. So if I have two browsers here, I now can click on a name and send a chat message to the other users. And of course, I also can reply. Here it is. So it doesn't look very fancy. It actually is, because the communication from here to here is done peer-to-peer. There's no server communication between this. So I directly send this message from this browser to this browser. The way this is done is through a protocol called WebRTC, which means real-time communication in the web between two clients. The only thing where you need a server for is actually for marshalling the connection and setting up the connection. Once you have the connection, the communication happens between the client, and you can not only send text, but also binary data. That means you can stream audio, you can stream video. This is really cool. And just recently, a week or so, first library wrapper called Meteor JS came out that actually wraps this in a very nice interface and makes it easy to use. If you want to know more about WebRTC, this blog article here describes it very well. So just to give you like a hint of what the code is looking like. Basically, this is one part of it. Basically, I'm just setting up a connection to peer, and then if there is incoming data, I just display it. So here is the other part where I just open a connection to someone and sending the data. Again, if you want to go in more detail, check out the code afterwards. And to make it as easy as possible to try it out yourself, I actually did a bit more work than just building the application. I also built up a Vagrant virtual machine. So all you have to do is clone this Vagrant virtual machine, say Vagrant up, then Vagrant SSH, go into the app directory, which is in the home directory of the Vagrant VM, and then call MRT, which starts up Meteor application. Unfortunately, for some of the stuff you have to do a bit more because you have to modify some host names. Please follow the README, which is not pushed to GitHub yet. It will be available, so the VM is already there. I just have to write the README. I will do this after the talk. And you can just go on there, clone this, set everything up, and try it out yourself and play with the code. So that's my talk. First of all, if you have any questions that we can't answer in the last 5 minutes, you can contact me through various ways, and I'm here the whole 2 days of a conference. Any questions about what I just showed you?
Okay. A round of applause, I think, for Bastian.
That's also very nice. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. If anyone's got any questions, there's people with microphones coming around.
Okay. If not, also if someone is interested, I also can offer that we do something at the unconference, check and dive down a bit more deeper into the code of the demonstration and show a bit more, because especially some of the stuff was very like fast, and I know that, and not much detail on how the implementation actually was done. So if anybody's interested, just come to me and we can do like a small unconference style session, and I can show a bit more of the code. Then one last thing, if you like this talk or if you didn't like this talk, please go to join in and rate this talk, because it's actually very important for the organizers, for us as speakers, to actually evaluate how all this was done. And oh, I hope I changed the URL. So I'm not quite sure if this was the right URL. Joined in. There is PHP UK conference on Join In. There you find all talks of all speakers. The idea is 8041, or just go to PHP unconference and please rate the talks. This is very important for everyone, and also important for you because it ensures that you get the best content on the conference. Thanks.